Hey there, fellow edibles enthusiasts. It's Margaret here, your host of Bite Me, the show about edibles. Are you ready to take your cannabis education to the next level while connecting with an amazing community of like-minded people? Then let me introduce you to something truly special, the Bite Me Cannabis Club. Imagine this, a welcoming space where you can learn, share, and grow your love for cannabis and making edibles. As a member, you'll get exclusive access to a private podcast feed, workshops, community challenges, live events, and best of all, a safe, supportive community where you can ask questions, share recipes, and bond over your shared passion for cannabis and food. So here's the deal. The doors to the Bite Me Cannabis Club are officially open, and you can be one of the first to join by signing up right now. So don't wait. Head over to joinbiteme.com. That's joinbiteme.com. And let's make 2025 the year you connect, learn, and create with other cannabis lovers in a community like no other. I can't wait to see you there. Hello, friends. It's episode 284, and today we are sitting down to talk to Karen of Sense and Purpose. Stay tuned. Welcome to Bite Me, the show about edibles, where I help you take control of your high life. I'm your host and certified ganger, Margaret, and I love helping cooks make safe and effective edibles at home. I'm so glad you're here. And welcome back, friends. We have a fun episode today. I had a wonderful conversation with Karen of Sense and Purpose, and Sense and Purpose is a beverage that is available in Ontario at the very least. I'm not sure where else in Canada. I can link to the website so you can see for yourselves and find out more about the brand after this episode. And before we get into it, I just want to say thank you to all the listeners out there who are listening, who are contributing in the Bite Me Cannabis Club, who are sending emails and fan mails and all the things that you do to support the show, sharing it with other friends who are into cannabis edibles and all the rest of it. It really does make a difference. Word of mouth is probably one of the best ways to spread the word about a podcast, especially in the cannabis space when it is so difficult to advertise. I can't advertise on almost any of the traditional platforms. Unfortunately, as we all know, Meta and Instagram currently are not too friendly towards cannabis. Neither are many of the other social media platforms, and a lot of that stuff is in flux anyway. Advertising on traditional podcast advertising platforms often don't allow cannabis content either, even though I feel like I'm helping to educate folks about cannabis and reduce stigma in a legal jurisdiction. This is the reality that I face. So any of that word of mouth really does go a long way to help people discover the show, and the more the merrier. Before we get into today's topic, I just want to mention that I have been working on my mental wealth this year, and I hope that you are finding ways to improve your sleep, your diet, your exercise, your stress management, and using exogenous compounds to help you maximize each of these areas. I know I am. I've been working lately on getting to bed earlier because I do love to doom scroll. And I know that's not necessarily healthy for me, especially when they talk about the light that comes from your phone as being very disruptive to your circadian rhythm. So even though I get pretty decent sleep, I often use cannabis before I go to bed, but I do find that Magic Mind Sleep helps me also get to sleep faster, because sometimes even when I do consume cannabis, my mind can race a little bit because I'm thinking of all the things that I have to do. That's, I guess, entrepreneurial life. And so the Magic Mind Sleep helps me get to sleep faster, enjoy a deeper sleep. And I use it often in conjunction with cannabis as well. And it's just one of the tools that I have in my toolkit to maximize these different areas of my mental wealth, so I can improve my mental resilience, because that is really what helps keep you going each and every day. So I love Magic Mind Clarity Shot in the morning when I sit down to work, because that really does help me focus and remain undistracted, which can be challenging sometimes. And in the evenings, I like Magic Mind Sleep. So why not make 2025 the year that you build your mental resilience right alongside me, improve your sleep and your awake clarity with Magic Mind? It is doctor validated. It is backed by research. It doesn't replace your morning coffee when you're using the Magic Mind Clarity, which I love because I love my coffee routine. So you can get 45% off the Magic Mind bundle with my link, magicmind.com, bite me jam. and try for yourself and see what you think. I would love to trade notes on it. You can always message me. You know where to find me. I'm all over the place, all over my little corner of the internet. By all means, reach out. I love hearing from listeners. So today we have a very special guest, Karen of Sense and Purpose. And one of the things that stood out for me with her brand is how intentional she was about creating this brand for the beverages market. And in Canada, the beverages market, even though it still represents a pretty small portion of the overall cannabis market, seems to be growing. There's more interest in that segment. And I don't go to dispensaries very often myself. Surprise, surprise, I make a lot of edibles. I make a lot of beverages. But when I do go to the dispensaries, one of the things I love to try are new beverages. The Sense and Purpose brand has a commitment to high quality ingredients, and Karen is just a rock star. I hope you enjoy this interesting and well-rounded conversation with Karen. Please enjoy. I am joined today with Karen from Sense and Purpose. And Karen, you have created a cannabis beverage company called Sense and Purpose. And I'm really glad that you're taking the time to sit down with me today and talk about all things around cannabis beverages and Sense and Purpose. But before we get into all the meat and potatoes today, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners of Bite Me?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. As I said, this is my very first podcast. So it's kind of a milestone of itself, hopefully the beginning of some great things to come. But yeah, so I've been in the cannabis business for pretty much 4 or 5 years since legalization. But pre that, I actually worked in consumer packaged goods. And I was very much a corporate person. I worked with basically 2 companies my whole career. One was Quaker Oats, which was eventually bought by Pepsi. And so Pepsi would be Pepsi QTG. So that group for 18 years. And then I went on to lead Nestle Waters in Canada. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I personally, that's business side. Personally, I'm a single mom, single parent, and have been since my 2 boys were 2 and 4. They're now 29 and 31. So that was quite some time ago. And happy to report that they're doing quite well and on their own. So I'm kind of feel like I'm living my long missed teenage years. I'm back to being on my own.
That's kind of nice though, isn't it? Especially at a time in your life when you probably feel like you have a lot more knowledge and wisdom about how the world works. So
Absolutely. 10 years ago, I quit the corporate world. I kind of quit life. Things were tougher back then. One of my sons was really struggling with addiction and mental illness. So I quit the world and I ultimately went traveling around Southeast Asia with a bunch of 20-year-olds. And I'll tell you that feeling, I was 50 at the time. But to your point, that feeling of, basically being able to travel like a 20-year-old, but with the budget and the wiseness, or if that's the right thing to look at, experience of a 50-year-old, it was a pretty fun experience, I must admit.
That would have been amazing, actually. I think that would be a lot of fun. And like, I love hanging around younger people, but then sometimes I'm reminded that, oh yeah, I'm not 20 anymore. Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that you were working with Quaker or Pepsi, because where I live, there's a Quaker plant. I guess it would be Pepsi now, but they make, I'm not sure what they make, but the city often smells like toasted oats or maple syrup and stuff. And it's so nice. It's very refreshing. Instead of having like a factory that's spewing out chemicals, it's spewing out deliciousness.
I actually worked in that factory. So that's a small world connection between you and I. Because I did years and years ago in the late 80s. I worked out of that building. There was the plant and then there was the head office right across the river. Which now I don't even know what they use it for now. I guess it's all just backup because they did move to Toronto. But yeah, going in there and seeing, they used to make Captain Crunch and granola bars and all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah, the instant oatmeal and oats and puffed rice, I think, even all kinds of things.
Yeah, that's it. You threw the bang right when they were puffing it.
Yeah. But people love Quaker Oats. Well, people still call it Quaker in town, but it's just well loved because it smells so good. So that's where I got my foundation. Yeah. So we're in the consumer packaged goods, and then you decided to transition to the cannabis industry, which most people would think is not an easy transition to make because it's so highly regulated. What inspired you to venture into cannabis beverages?
It's interesting because it wasn't really a direct path. It wasn't like I woke up one day and went, oh, I'm going to go into cannabis. That'd be a good place to be. There was a big dose of naivety, I would say,
Right.
because I did not understand what such a highly regulated industry would mean. And I think that's a good thing, because if I did, it's one of those things, if I knew then what I know now, I might not have done what I did.
Right.
You know what I mean? But ultimately where it happened is, as I mentioned just a minute ago, I had gotten to a point in my career, I was doing really, really well. I was set to go international, which is something I'd always wanted to do. And at the same time, I was having huge challenges with one of my sons, and one of my sons was having huge challenges. And the more I was trying to help him, the more unhealthy I was getting. So I was, I guess, burning the candle at both ends, trying to run the company, trying to, help this child that at the time we didn't know was schizophrenic and an addict. So, it just got really tough. So I sort of stepped away from corporate world, the beginning of that trip that I just told you about, just to get myself sort of healthy and, mind, body, spirit back to a place that when he was ready for help, I would be ready to help him. So in that journey, after my travel and having a year of just a ton of fun, really, and learning myself and getting to know myself again, I started taking contracts because I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up at the young age of 51. And cannabis was becoming legal. And so it's a bit of circumstance, because I happened to be working on a contract for a small water company, kind of helping them get it on its road to profitability, et cetera. And the brand itself was called Canada Pure. And I'm saying that because it has relevance in that, about a year after working on it, on the business, myself and another consultant to turn it around for the owner, he was really a tech guy. This was more of a passion project for him. And he tasked us to sell it. And we were a bit taken aback because we'd worked so hard and we turned this brand around for him and we were on a really good path. And in fact, cannabis was becoming legal. And as we're brainstorming ideas, it just hit me one day, Canada is known for amazing water. I certainly learned that when I was with Nestle Waters. We're known for amazing weed. They're both healthy products. They're both good for you. I just, with my brain, I kind of went wow, what if you could put weed in water and make a functional drink that could help with things? So it was literally a bit of a dream. So circumstance and dream, and it just kind of went from there. So I got this little bee in my bonnet. Wouldn't it be great to do that? My drive, my whole life has been about affecting positive change. That gives me a ton of energy. So I thought, wow, that would really affect some positive change and change some behavior. That's basically how it started. I knew nothing about the business of cannabis. All I knew is that I was a consumer of cannabis. And I knew the benefits of cannabis. I used to call it mama's little helper at times, So I knew that there was some really good health benefits to it. And so the more I learned, and as I started to learn that you can control the effect of the cannabis based on, a ratio of cannabinoids and how many, I didn't even know what a cannabinoid was before I got into it, but knowing that there's different ones, it just really became this mission for me to develop the world's purest, cleanest, functional beverage. And at the time when I tried to buy the company, I just thought, man, Canada Pure, what a great name, right? For something that we were trying to do. Now, spoiler alert, I did not get the company. And in hindsight, that was a very good thing, because then I started to learn about the regulations and I might not have been able to do exactly what I was thinking at the time.
Right. So you've also been a lifelong cannabis user as well.
I have been, yes. Yeah.
Yes. Do you have a preferred method of consumption?
I almost hate to admit it, and I'm trying very hard to change it, but yes, I have been a smoker pretty much all my life. And now with the legalization and we got to the convenience of pre-rolls, I would say that that's typically my preferred choice. However, now that we've got beverages, I am truly working towards 100% walking the talk and getting off of the smoking and onto the drinking of beverages. So, and edibles as well. I'm quite excited, which is another reason I'm excited to be on your show today and learn from you, is I just bought myself a first miracle butter maker, I think it is.
Oh, so nice. The magical butter maker. Yeah, I
want to learn how to make some edibles and really get off of the smoking. Because as we know, combustion or smoking of any type is just not good. So
yeah. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that too, because I had a guest on my show quite a while ago, and we were busting cannabis myths. And one of the myths we talked about, he felt that cannabis beverages were very akin to the effects you would get from smoking. Much more similar in some respects than in edibles. And I mean, in some ways that checks out, because usually the onset's a lot faster with a beverage. It doesn't last as long. And I've kind of, it seems to check out a lot, because I do enjoy the beverages a lot myself. And so for those smokers out there who are trying to sort of stay away from that combustion that they know isn't so healthy for them, cannabis beverages can be a fantastic way to sort of replace that habit.
Yeah, I mean, also build on that. It's totally true. It is like edibles. It is a little bit of a different, it's sort of a whole body.
Yeah.
I think. So it does have a different feeling. And then the beverages, depending, I mean, there's resin beverages, there's the ones like mine that have different cannabinoids and different ratios. There's some that are just straight THC. So they do definitely, I think, because they do hit you harder or faster, and you come off of it faster, you definitely get much more of that feeling, say, like a joint.
Yeah.
But I would also say, and certainly for those legacy consumers out there, like myself, I've heard this a zillion times, and what I tell them, like, they're like, oh, I'm never going to swap a beverage for my joint. It'll never do what I want it to do. So there's a couple of things. Is one, it's really quite complementary. And so for someone like myself that's trying to smoke less, my strategy to do that is I enjoy one of my own beverages, maybe 2 or 3, while I'm smoking. But what I find is, A, I smoke a heck of a lot less, and B, it because more so than B, because it basically, keeps the beverage complements the high. It kind of keeps you guys there. And so it's helped me significantly cut down. And then, of course, there's always times when you're in situations that you can't smoke anyways. And so they're great for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So beverages are wonderful all around. So that's why I probably talk about them so much on my show. But
hey, I didn't ask you, you've tried the Sense and Purpose beverages? Did you?
Yes, I did. Yeah, they were great. And I think the favorite one that I tried was the Recharge.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was the sparkling water one with the juice, which was a really nice combination, because I love sparkling beverages and I often drink just plain sparkling water, but that the juice that was with it was really nice.
Yeah, that one was a pretty neat one. That's our latest addition to the family. And what is unique about it relative to the other ones is it really, truly is just juice and sparkling water.
Yep.
That's it. No sweeteners, no taste maskers or anything like that. And then, of course, the emulsion in it with the cannabis. So, and it tastes great, right? It doesn't taste like cannabis. Did it taste like cannabis?
No, not at all. Which is another reason why I like a lot of the cannabis beverages.
Yeah, that was the intent. The challenge is that a lot of my competitors use a ton of sugar to mask the taste. So being able to do something that's natural and with juice. And I must admit, there may be just a little influence from my past and working with brands like San Pellegrino sparkling fruit beverages. Or to me, the Recharge is a little bit like, I don't know if you know the drink Orangina. Mm-hmm. It's an Italian beverage, as are the San Pellegrino. So it's a little bit modeled after that.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you obviously have the perfect background for that, because it was lovely. And there is a bit of sugar in it, but it's really pretty marginal, especially when you look at some of the sugar content of other cannabis beverages out there. Some of them are really high, like more than a can of Coke too. So, and I there's still a lot of great ones out there, but you kind of have to pick and choose when you might want to consume that sugar. So it's not really as much of a concern.
Well, and I mean, some of them are so high in sugar, and you said it, like they're more than a can of Coke. Again, just because I've been in that business for so long, I know that a can of Coke is 39 grams of sugar, and that's a lot. And I've also learned that 1 gram of sugar is about the equivalent to 4 teaspoons of sugar.
Right.
So, when you've got some of these beverages then that are like 40 grams of sugar,
that visual. Yeah. You can just imagine it, just that pile of sugar.
That's it. That's it. People are choosy when they take it. It's not about, I think we're not about sort of avoiding those things. It's about moderation, but still you can waste a lot of your, your sugar allotment on one drink if you're not careful.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I can't remember what the daily allotment for sugar intake of added sugar is supposed to be, but it's definitely not 39 grams. It's a lot lower than that, I think. So, you do have to pick and choose those occasions when you're going to use those higher sugar beverages. But Yeah.
That was what we were trying to address too. One of the things is knowing that. And again, this is where I feel like I've got a little bit of an unfair advantage because of my background, by just knowing and being so close to consumer trends and watching them for, certainly when I went to, it became even more prevalent when I went to Nestle Waters, because that's all we did was water or forms of water. But just watching the consumer trends and the growth and focus on health and wellness, right? So I knew that low sugar or avoiding sugar is something that folks are trying to do. You can get into the zero sugar and seltzers. That's a pretty big segment in alcohol and in water, as you mentioned. 0 calories, 0 sugar. I often think 0 taste. So I was trying to find something in between.
Yeah.
That had a decent taste, was all natural, was low in low in sugar. So
yeah, you accomplished that goal for sure. But I wanted to also touch on, because you kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, about the purpose behind Sense and Purpose. Like, why did you choose that name? What's sort of behind that idea?
It's interesting. So it wasn't like right off the top, like most things I'm learning, they never come right to you right away. Like we went through a few reiterations to get to the brand name. And it was quite a fun process. And when we got there, it was one of those things that's going to sound silly. It just made sense. Like it was all of a sudden it was like that. But really the idea, there's a couple things. So behind Sense and Purpose, Sense itself is about our mission to help people, certainly new consumers. And that's really who we are targeted at, is if I had to call it a bullseye target, it's more that new consumer. But it was to help people make sense of this world of cannabis, because I truly do believe that cannabis has purpose in everyday life. So that's kind of the easiest to, base premise of it. At the same time, Sense is also about the sort of sensory experience that we want to create. So we don't just put, like, we're not knocking off pop and some traditional flavors. We're really thinking through the ingredients that we use. We're using ingredients that bring inherent claims already on their own. And we've got things like green tea paired with ginger juice, with lemon juice, to give really a great sensory effect. So that's the other kind of meaning behind Sense. And the secondary meaning behind Purpose is exactly that, is it sort of reflects, intention, I guess would be the best way to say it. And so it was crafting a product that had a really meaningful role. Like I absolutely wanted these products to have a purpose in people's life, whether it's relaxing or whether it's, connection or self-care or whatever it might be. It was about having a purpose for these beverages. So there's a couple of double entendres, I guess, in there, really. But Sense and Purpose, when you put it all together, I guess at the end of the day, it just really reflects our commitment to sort of balance, and a balanced life and a wellness life.
Yeah, I really like that. And it's interesting that you mentioned that about like the new consumer, because I don't think my sister listens to this show, but she's coming down to visit me soon. And she has agreed to try some cannabis beverages. I think the last time we shared cannabis together was in high school, and she did not like it. So she hasn't really touched cannabis since then, but she's willing to try some cannabis beverages, some very low dose ones. So I'm excited to share some with her just to see, let her test it out, because it's been a very long time. And she's kind of curious about it too, right? A lot of people are curious in coming to cannabis through beverages.
It's interesting. I've seen a lot of that. And first of all, I have to make sure I get you some more Sense and Purpose so that she can try them. But so in my age group, I'm actually outside of the bullseye group, as much as I like to think I'm in it, because I think I'm a lot younger than I really am. But I've started doing is I'm trying to figure out ways to get to the consumer, and I'm recognizing that there's a lot that are curious, but very, very hesitant. So I've started doing house parties, and just so that you have more of that one-on-one experience, you can help people. They feel a little bit, safer, I guess, trying it, doing exactly what you're doing with your sister. So that's awesome. We need more people doing that. But when I start to show them, and I will make them, I've got a cocktail recipe for pretty much each one of them. And I can, the recharge, for example, that we were talking about, which is basically juice and sparkling water. People have told me it's like a mimosa in a can. So I can show them, if you put in a quarter of the can and you use some really good non-alcoholic sparkling wine or Prosecco, and that's what I do, is I make mimosas with it.
Oh, very nice. I like that.
Like, oh, this tastes great. And then it's funny to see them start to get a little bit of the buzz at times, and they get giggly and they love it. And it just eases them into it with like, oh, okay, I don't really have that big of a reason to be afraid of this. So
Right.
yeah, I love what you're doing with her. I think, that's kind of one of my strategies, is to try to build a whole slew of friends and family brand ambassadors, because I really do think it's that they need, I feel like, especially the women, we need that comfort, that trust, sure, when we're trying it, especially when it's the first time.
Well, it's the set and setting, right? Like they talk about set and setting a lot with psychedelics, but it applies 100% to cannabis for sure as well. And if they're comfortable and they're with somebody that they believe knows what they're doing, they'll be a lot more comfortable. And
absolutely,
half the battle right there.
The trust, right? The trust.
Yeah, absolutely. But I like the idea with the non-alcoholic sparkling wine. I think I'll have to try that out, because I find a lot of people also aren't drinking as much anymore, because she doesn't drink almost at all, because like a lot of women I know that are getting older, they find that alcohol doesn't really agree with them anymore.
No. And you know what? That is a huge, I wouldn't even say trend. I think it's becoming a movement. Mm-hmm. And I know there's the term Cali sober that's floating around, right? Of just like cannabis only and no alcohol, but it is growing, whether it's male or female. Certainly, as I said, giving away my age, I'm about to break into a new decade. So my age group, we're definitely, it's not even that it doesn't agree with our bodies, in that we can't recover like we used to, right?
Yeah.
About the liver damage, et cetera. So that's a huge trend that I believe is what will set cannabis beverages up in general to just really, really take off.
Yeah. I think so. It's definitely still a pretty small market segment, but I just see it growing more and more. And as I've had this podcast now for about 5 years, just people are talking about it more and more. And there's definitely the interest.
Huge change in the conversation from 4 years ago, when I first started getting out there and actually trying to sell in my product stuff, to now. The conversation it's miles ahead. It's amazing. And then you look down to the US. Oh my God, that's my dream. In Minnesota. Now they've got a little bit of a loophole, because they have the Farm Bill, which legalized hemp and products made from hemp. At the time, I don't think they realized that hemp, which it's the same as cannabis, it just has less than 0.3% THC, that it actually can form a form of THC that is just as potent as from cannabis. But it's being sold outside of the Cannabis Act. So in regular wine stores, like literally there's a store, I've seen pictures of it, where it's, here's your beer drinks, here's your cooler drinks, here's your THC drinks, and huge displays. And, it's really cool to see that. And I think one day that'll be like that here, but it might.
I would love that. And did you mention Minnesota in particular, or is this just general in the States?
No, it's Minnesota in particular, where I think they were kind of the lead in, I don't want to say the name or get it wrong, but I think it was 6 Points Wine Company. It was a specific company that sort of really grasped hold of it. Now more and more states are. So it is starting to spread across the states.
Well, because I do have listeners in Minnesota as well. And they told me that they are a lot of the bars, like you can go to a bar and buy a cannabis drink. And I was just like, that would be such a game changer, because a lot of the times, like, I have to be careful when I drink. A lot of the times if you've driven to a place, you have to think about that. And I just also don't want to be laid out for a whole day or longer if I get a hangover, which takes less and less alcohol these days. So I think that was really forward thinking as far as Minnesota goes. And I wish Canada would be a little more forward thinking on that.
We're just ultimately hugely conservative, as we all know. And you know what? For good reason. I think, like with Health Canada, the whole approach was start low and go slow. Yeah. Really, really, really tight regulations. And I know a lot of people were kind of ticked off, because it seemed in the time leading up to just legalization in 2018, and then beverages and edibles were a year later, it felt like they kept changing regulations and making them even tighter. And so, there was some frustration. But at the same time, with their mandate of just trying to keep quality, keep it out of hands of kids, the safety, I think the theory is it's always easier to loosen a regulation than it is to what's. And that's kind of what's happened in the US. Like, they've gotten themselves into a little bit of a pickle, but it's I think it's a good place to be. And I know it's going to start here in Alberta. I would say Alberta is our forward thinking portion of the cannabis. industry. And so 2 years ago, I believe it was, they started allowing it at like comedy festivals and drink fests and stuff, concerts.
Right.
They learned a bit in how they executed it. It was allowed again this year with opening it up a little bit more in terms of, having space, a consumption area, whatever. So I think it's coming.
So when you say
we'll be able to do that.
So you're saying that you could go to a comedy festival and you could get a beer or you could get a cannabis beverage or something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't quite that simple. It was like there was a segregated area. And in the first year that they did it, I believe literally like they would be in conjunction with a retailer and you could almost like order it instantly and the retailer would then bring it to that space and deliver it there. As it evolved, from what I understand this past year, it was more about a retailer could actually have a little kiosk right on site, but it was still in a segregated area, somewhat away from the alcohol.
Right.
But I think it's only a matter of time where
before they're next to each other.
I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I'm a bit biased, but both again for beverages and for health and wellness, because no matter which way you look at it, a cannabis beverage is going to do a heck of a lot less damage to you than alcohol. Like it's a known carcinogen, alcohol, right? It's hurting our liver. It's hurting our brain. Like, look at the issues. So I think once we kind of Health Canada and we've experimented enough with it, they get their heads around this and quite understand that, it's a no-brainer in my mind. So I just hope I live long enough to see it.
Yeah, I know, right? Because sometimes these things seem to take a long time, but I know there's people working on this kind of thing. So, and I am grateful that we also have federal legalization and not the, sort of the state by state model that they're doing right now in the US. So there's definitely a huge advantage to that alone. So eventually, because also being able to buy a cannabis drink at a comedy festival sounds like the perfect combination to me. Like that's what I would love. So yeah. Now, as far as sense and purpose goes, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced in bringing this product to market?
Probably not necessarily what you would think. I would say the biggest challenges were and continue to be, one, raising money. Right. Which links directly to cash flow. But when I say cash flow, what I've learned is that really means picking the right manufacturer partner. So because of the sort of excitement, let's call it, around cannabis in the early days and these huge valuations on companies that then really 5 years later, have had to not downsize, I'd say right size. They were building empires. They had so much money. They were spending it on things that, they were building their empires without looking at what the market could bear. Mm-hmm. And as a result, there's been a real cloud over cannabis. Then you throw in a few little extra twists like COVID, high inflation rate and interest rates now. I kind of look back at this, all you can do is laugh because otherwise you'd cry. But, I started product development in April 2020. Like we were on plan. We'd raised some money or we were on our way to doing that. And all of a sudden COVID hit. So that really threw a wrench at first. And again, I think like any big challenge, it does depend on how you approach it, because I started to look at it as an opportunity. And so it worked out well. But so that would be one, is raising the money. There's been this cloud over it. So even today, we're about to start it. I've been trying for 2 years to raise money. I've had to self-fund because I just can't. People just are not interested in cannabis in Canada right now. So, unless you're a $40 million company. So that's been a tough one. The other big one is just a bit of a negative that's come out of the high regulations is that you have to have a license to sell it to the board. A lot of brands like myself do not have a license. It's very costly to get one. And so we've relied on our manufacturers, and that's created a bit of a problem because they have complete control of cash flow.
Right.
So unfortunately, what's happening for some of the brands, and I've been through it, is where the manufacturers got their own growing pains and their own challenges. So when they get paid for your order from, say, the OCS, the Ontario Cannabis Store, they just kind of keep that money to help solve their own problems, and they're not passing it along. So, we had a huge challenge. I had to leave one manufacturer because of it. Almost on a high point, I relaunched this year in cans. So again, able to take a negative and turn it into a positive. But yeah, it's kind of the boring business side that's been the biggest challenge, to be honest, when in fact, I thought it would be more about building the brand when you were so restricted in what you could put on a can or what you can say, or, I thought that would be the bigger challenge. But in fact, it's really been some of the business fundamentals.
Yeah. And those are pretty significant challenges from the sounds of it. And you're not the first person that I've heard that aspect of the business is really difficult.
Yeah.
So, which is unfortunate, because I think you would have more people participating, I guess, with some really interesting stuff if it wasn't so problematic to raise the money and deal with the licenses and all that kind of thing. So,
yeah. Well, and the other side of it, that it does really kind of hurt my heart, and I don't know what to do with it. I'd like to do something about it. I don't know what it means yet, but I see it really is kind of squishing the little guy out of the market.
Yeah.
And we're typical Canadian fashion. We're getting very consolidated, and it's a couple or a few big players that are dominating. And, the smaller entrepreneurial, like little brands like myself, are really struggling to survive. And I've unfortunately seen a lot of them not survive.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate no matter what industry you're talking about, because it's the smaller brands that I think bring a lot of interesting things to the market. Cannabis is definitely no exception. And yeah, when you have like these huge businesses, they're just not as receptive. They're not as agile, I guess. And the stuff that they're putting out just isn't as interesting, I think.
Well, and I mean, we're all focused on business, so I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but I think there is a different level of passion when you're dealing with the entrepreneur directly, right? And so, yes, for me, I hope to, make some decent money out of it and maybe retire one day, but it really isn't about the money. It was about being able to bring a really amazing product to market that does something that's going to help people. And so the creativity, you can lose that. Whereas a big company, they tend to be all about, okay, well, where's the volume today? And we're seeing that in our category. For example, with beverages, 70% of the category, of the products in the category are, the maximum THC. They tend to almost all be some version of a soda, whether it's a craft soda or a knockoff of root beer or cream soda, or what it is. And taste is iffy. Certainly in the beginning, they were awful. But then that's when I started adding the sugar. But you know why? Because right now, the majority of the cannabis segment is typically male, typically sort of 30-ish. They don't care as much about sugar. They're more interested in getting a buzz or whatever it is. So that's where the market is today. Who is out there looking for the future? And I'm not sure that the big guys are really prepared to do that, because they need to see a return a lot faster.
Right. It
becomes that might be a little unfair to say, a bit of a generalization, but that's what I see.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's entrepreneurs like you that are changing the game and bringing out these interesting products, and you have your ear to the ground when it comes to some of these other people who are consuming them. Like, it's not just the 30-year-old guy. It's like someone like me who's in my 40s, and I have a very different perspective on the world. So we need folks like you to be putting these things out. So I hope on that same vein, you can share some of the wins or the milestones that you've hit. I mean, I'm sure it hasn't all been challenges. I'm sure there's been some good positives as well.
Yeah, no, look, I did realize, I would say one of the biggest challenges in general, I'm not sure that a lot of people have been able to do it. I'm very proud of the fact that I have, but is just shifting from that corporate world to that entrepreneurial world.
Yes.
Where, corporate world, you've got systems, you've got processes, you've got data, you've got all sorts of things. In this world, it's a little bit like all over the place. So yeah, no, we've had some really amazing wins. If I think, and I was thinking about some of the things that have, I get such a high from, no pun intended, because I haven't smoked anything. One of the big ones was, I was about 2.5 years into this, like researching and trying to figure out how to make it happen before we finally raised our first bit of capital. And we were at the point where it was like, okay, we're either going to go somewhere or we're not. And so when we closed that sort of first lead investor in that first round, quite honestly, the only round so far. And that was able to get us to market. I just remember how excited we were. And we had done so much prep and work that we were ready to just go. So from closing the capital to making, I think we were in market within 6 months, which was pretty cool. I would say another big one, which all the time gets me excited is when I see some of the results coming in. So in Alberta, I just saw somebody was doing some due diligence on Sense and Purpose. We've been having some talks about maybe working together, and told me that, guess what? We've been consistently ranked the number 7 best-selling brand in Alberta for beverages. There's 70 or 80 brands. So
wow.
I'm pretty excited about that. Yeah. I know what we launched in cans was another big highlight this year, because I launched in a bottle initially for a very specific reason. It was COVID. Mm-hmm. We couldn't get the right cans. I'm out of efficacy. I didn't want the cannabinoids leaching into the can liner, so I went in bottles. But I knew ultimately I needed to be in a can. So switching manufacturers last year, getting a new contract, getting away from the one that wasn't paying me, and then being able to launch in cans, but really seeing how quickly we were almost out of market for a year. And then we got right back up to 300 stores carrying us so quickly. And that just tells me that the retailers get it. They understand it. So I don't know. I could go on forever. I mean,
but that's great though, because if you didn't have those wins, then you probably wouldn't be sitting here right now talking to me, because you would have given up by now.
Well, that's it.
Yeah. Like those wins keep you going.
Biggest wins, I have to say, Margaret, though. And I do a lot of events, because that's the one way you get that interaction. We leverage technology a ton. We're very strategic. We're a very small team. I joke, I'll say we're a team of 3, me, myself, and I. But I actually do have a 4th person that is with me on this journey. And but when we're at events, and I just did the Kind Winter Fair show, but when I see somebody like, beverages, and they're like very skeptical, and they all taste like this, and then they taste it, and to see that look on their face, and then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, like, what is this? And then you get into this full-on conversation. Like, that in itself is probably the number one thing that gives me the energy to keep going and gives me.
It's dealing with directly with the people who are consuming your product. For sure, which is a really nice segue into my next question. And because you're a small business, you're an entrepreneur, you are interacting with the people that you're like the customers. What kind of feedback do you get, generally speaking, from the customers that are drinking your drinks?
We almost always, like 99% of the time, we get really positive feedback. The things that they're most surprised about is that it tastes good. And believe me, in the first couple of years of cannabis beverages, again, we were a year later, so we've been legal since 2019. So the first 2 to 3 years, and even now, like, they did not taste good. So
I remember that. Yeah.
People are typically surprised in a good way at how great they taste. And then when we get into the conversation of what they are, and like literally I have 4 ingredients, outside of the emulsion, which takes up 2 lines on my ingredient sort of list, I have maybe 4 ingredients in each one of them, very clean and very low in sugar. So people are always amazed at that. And then usually the third most common comment I get, almost always in this order too, is the dosages that we're using, and the fact that we're playing with ratios of THC to CBD to give an effect. We're not allowed to tell you about it, but that's why I named my beverages that way, like refocus, recharge, relax. They actually do what they say that they do. And what's even more fun is now I'm running into consumers at some of these shows or bud tenders and retailers that have actually now tried the drink. And so every time I get the feedback like, oh my God, this actually does what you said it was going to do, is just amazing. It's almost to the point that I started to think maybe they're all just blowing smoke up my butt, because no one has said anything negative yet. Like, the most negative I've had is, I don't like grapefruit, or I can't have grapefruit because it affects my whatever medication.
Yeah.
So
and you'll run into that, obviously, but I'm sure they're not blowing smoke up your ass because you're putting out a great product. So why would they? And
well, exactly. And they don't know me, so why would they? But it's sometimes I think I continue to be surprised at just how well received they are.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear, and that's got to be part of the wins that you're experiencing, is when you get that wonderful feedback from people. Yeah. But that does bring up the question of how you see stigma still showing up in the work that you're doing, because I tend to forget myself, because my whole world is around cannabis. I'm talking to cannabis people. I'm in, it's just all cannabis. And then I remember there's people like my sister who doesn't consume. Now, she's pretty open-minded, considering what I do, but there are a lot of people out there who still have a lot of stigma around cannabis and kind of, turn their nose up to it or whatever. And are you encountering that very much in the work that you're doing?
I've definitely come across it, and I would agree with you that it is probably still our biggest challenge. Again, I'm a type of person that a challenge means an opportunity. So I think it is our biggest opportunity. I do think it is starting to fade quite quickly, which is great. I think I've also learned there's some people you're just never going to change their mind, right? So I'm learning to back away from those pretty quickly. But the majority of people that I'm coming across, also in my family, like I'm all about cannabis as well. As I said up front, I've consumed my whole life. Not that most of my family knew that. That's only recent that they've learned that. But most of them were not. Like I grew up in a generation of basically drinkers. And so even my friend group, they're all drinkers and they're very hesitant. There's some stigmas there. Some of them I've not tried to push it, but I find the majority of them are quite open. And one of the probably the most surprising things when I think of this stigma and how it's going away, the fastest growing group of cannabis consumers is like 60 plus.
Right.
So enough. I've actually been asked to come into, my mom's in a retirement home. I've been asked to come in and, demo my beverages and talk about them. And quite frankly, I'm nervous to do that. I haven't done it yet. I'm actually linking with a group called the Cannabis Nurses, because quite honestly, I'm too afraid to go and talk about a recreational product in a setting like that with people that I don't know what meds they're on. So, I think there's a lot of work we have to do there. But the point is, my 83-year-old mother drinks half a can of Relax every night to go to bed so that she can stay asleep. So the stigma is there. I think my takeaway would be the stigma is there. It's definitely fading fast. We're doing our part, you and me, to sort of help get rid of that stigma. And I think the more we bring it out in our conversations, like certainly now all of a sudden around my friend group, it's like no one's like, oh, you're in cannabis. It's, it's just a conversation. How's business going? What are you doing?
Yeah. And people find it interesting. But when you mention that it's the 60 plus group where that demographic, that interest is growing a lot, it's surprising, but it's not surprising because cannabis is so effective at so helping people with so many different ailments. So the fact that your mom, for example, uses it to help her sleep. And then there's also the idea too, that a lot of older folks, they like you said, some people will never change their mind, but they might be open to trying a cannabis topical, because those can also be super effective. So that's, if they don't want to get high, and some people just don't, then there's definitely other options that the plant can offer them too. So that's what makes this thing so wonderful.
Well, and I think right there you're hitting it, is people are starting to understand slow, it's lagging even a little bit, but that it's not always about getting high.
Yeah.
Right. You get into some of these CBD and the minor cannabinoids like CBN and CBG and CBC. I don't know. I was doing some research because I want to get into that with my drinks. CBN is a minor cannabinoid that I found out apparently has been used for like 50 years to treat insomnia. But we didn't know about that, right? So I think the more that people are learning and understanding that it's not just about getting buzzed, they're definitely, that goes a long way to getting rid of the stigma.
Yes, I think especially with probably older folks as well, just because the idea of setting an intention or using it intentionally resonates with a lot of folks, because they just don't want to feel like they're just, I don't know. I mean, I'm too old to be like, I'm getting wrecked. That's just not where I'm at in my life right now. Like maybe 20 years ago, that might've been a different story, but that's not what I'm trying to do these days. So
no, I hear you 100%. It's not my favorite activity anymore at all.
Now, are you doing anything else with Sense and Purpose around the concept of educating consumers about responsible consumption?
We're doing our best within the limitations that we have. I always believe in pushing the envelope. So we've got an education for sure. Education is at the base of everything we do, from retailers and bud tenders onward. When I get new listings, I'm pretty insistent. I mean, of course, I'm not going to turn it down, but I really push for saying I want the ability to train and educate your staff, because they're the ones that are going to be influencing the consumer. So definitely do a lot there. I've got training videos and that sort of thing that we do with them. With the consumer, it really is always trying to put it in that guise of, but it like in that realm of education and talking about how it can help them and the function. Mm-hmm. I think I'm pretty sure I've taken a different approach than most. I really have approached this not like cannabis beverages, not as a cannabis opportunity, like not as just another format of cannabis. I've really approached it as a beverage opportunity, and it's a functional beverage opportunity, and our function just happens to come from cannabis. So
right. Yeah. So you're really taking the lead on that and saying, because the bud tenders too have a pretty important role because they are the customer facing employee at any dispensary, and people are curious. They want to know.
Yeah. So education wise, I'm really keen. It's just a brand new relationship I'm starting to form, but I met a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now in Calgary. I was out there for an event. And as I said, I mentioned I met this group called the Cannabis Nurses.
Mm-hmm.
And, they do a lot of work with veterans and, helping elderly and educating. When I told them one of my concerns about going into a retirement home, they're like, well, let's do it together because we know that side of it and you've got the product. So looking forward to doing, more collaborations where education is at the forefront of it.
Right. And I think that's really important too, especially on the medical side, because even though it's legal here, there's a lot of medical professionals that are still hesitant to prescribe cannabis, if you will. Like if I go to my doctor, they're probably not going to tell me, oh, just use some cannabis. Like that's just not where they're at yet. And they need some of that education, which they're probably not getting in medical school. So these types of collaborations are really important. And it sounds interesting because like you said, there's older folks in nursing homes that want to know about this stuff and they'd be really interested.
There's also younger folks too, and I look back I don't know if it would have helped, but I look back at the situation with my son. And, in hindsight, which is always 2020, and we look way back to when sort of his challenges started and he was smoking a lot of weed. And because I'm tolerant of weed, I kind of thought, he's a rebellious teenager. He's going to grow out of it. You know what I mean? But what I realized and learned was that he was self-medicating because he was anxious and he couldn't sit still. And there was all sorts of issues going on that he was trying to calm himself because he was too embarrassed to talk about the anxiety he's feeling. And when you look at, unfortunately, society today, and we could go a whole other podcast just probably on that, but there's a lot of young people, middle-aged people, like we're all mental health is a huge challenge.
Yeah. And it's not something that gets talked enough about. And I don't know if there's sometimes enough funding, even in Canada, for mental health services and stuff, because there's still stigma around that as well, for sure, to come out openly and say you're having these struggles. But it's also not surprising because I feel like we live in some really weird times right now too. And if you're already having some struggles with mental health and then you pile on all the weird shit that's happening right now, it's cannabis can be very helpful, but it's also, that's when you probably need a little more guidance as far as using it so you're not self-medicating.
Absolutely. I live right near Cam H. I'm here because of my son. That's how I got to this area. And the whole model is about harm reduction.
Yeah.
Right. And I kind of I even look at myself, like before I quit the world in 2015, I was drinking too much. I was smoking too much. I was toking too much. I was working too much. Like I was just a mess. And, had I had something like sense and purpose available to me, I honestly believe I would have been in a very different place. Right now, I went away, I fasted for 28 days and I detoxed and I did all that great fun stuff that you needed to do. Cause it's not just about, not drinking, so to speak. But there's a huge place in the world for this type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how has working in the cannabis industry changed your perspective on cannabis? Because you already mentioned that you've been sort of a lifelong cannabis user. Has your perspective changed at all?
I would say, if anything, it's probably broadened and sort of grown even more to love what it can do. As I said, I've learned a ton. But when you start to really understand how it's been used, like I didn't know CBN and had been used for insomnia for 40 years. And we use, did it in different formats. I would say it's really helped me grow and really appreciate it. And I've loved as I've learned the industry, you have to network. That's the way you learn from other people, and just to see how it's impacted and affected so many people in such a positive way and the different uses. Yeah, I have absolutely. I love being in the industry. I'm not afraid or shy or nervous to tell anybody I'm in cannabis anymore. I might have been a little bit at the beginning, I will admit. Like, oh, what are they going to think of me? And I did actually. I lost one or two friends over it, to be honest, to cannabis, because they're like, how could you do that with a son having the challenges you have? And they just thought it was very poor taste. So, you have to kind of let those ones go and work through them. But just to see and know the benefits, it's incredible.
Right. Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense to me because I know before I started this podcast, I knew some stuff about weed, but not that much, I realize now. In fact, I think I knew very little, actually. I remember there was a point in my life quite a while ago that, I used to think that the strain names, the cultivar names are just kind of made up. And I suppose there was a lot I didn't know. So legalization and having this show I've just learned so much, and legalization in particular, because people are free to do more research and talk about it openly, and it's not underground and hidden. And that 100 years of prohibition has kind of set back the research a lot, but that's all changing now, which is really exciting to see. So it's an exciting time to be in cannabis as well, especially in Canada, because we're kind of leading the charge in the world, which is really exciting as well. So,
and sometimes it's frustrating that we do, the research is opening up. It's awesome. But there's also been anecdotal research for thousands of years about how amazing this plant is. Yeah. But I didn't know any of that. I never would have thought to go and look into that. And it's only when you start to learn more, because we're in it, that you realize it. And it's empowering. It's exciting. You feel like you're part of something that's really positive. And anything is going to have both sides. Like someone could always take advantage of whatever the situation is. But I think it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah. So for yourself and for Sense and Purpose, where do you see Sense and Purpose and yourself in, say, 5 years?
Well, I would love to see Sense and Purpose as a much larger company. So Sense and Purpose is my brand. I just wanted to say something. And Woven with 2 E's is the company.
Right.
So, and the whole idea of Woven is with the 2 V's was I fully believe when you weave things together, it becomes much, much stronger. So my whole approach to business is about working with partners and bringing in like-minded business partners, not employees, right? And contracts and stuff. So Sense and Purpose being our first brand, it's got a lot of legs and it's got a lot of places it can go in the immediate future because of really funding. I see us rounding out the platform or the family. Like I did have a Recover in a little elixir shot. It was in Alberta, didn't get accepted here. It's a bit of ahead of its time. I see getting that into a can, and I see maybe some flavor extensions. But I also see us getting into, with that brand, getting into, and in 5 years, I'd love to be the ones that are like the wellness leaders. We've got a menopause drink. We've got
that'd be great.
An old person drink, a sleeping drink, or whatever. Like there's so many places to go. So I want to go into minor cannabinoids and continue to work with ratios in that. But I also have a couple of other brands in my back pocket that I've trademarked. One that I've sort of trademarked and earmarked, in my mind, specifically targeted at the 2S LGBTQ plus community.
Oh, cool.
Big cornerstone of cannabis and its legalization. I also happen to be part of the community. So of course I want to support my community. So I think that's pretty exciting. And then I have another one that is, I would say, earmarked really for that Gen Z. This is the generation that's grown up only knowing cannabis being legal, basically.
Yeah.
And they really aren't drinkers, like alcohol drinkers. Now, I'm very conscious, and I think there's some absolute legitimacy about what cannabis can do to a young brain. So I don't want to quote market to them until they get to a certain point. I think the lead Gen Zs now are somewhere around 22, 23, I believe. Mm-hmm. So I think it's probably only a matter of some time to get that. So I see the company just continuing to expand, and hopefully I can continue to lead it.
Well, that all sounds wonderful, and also sounds like you're going to be really busy over the next few years, which is exciting. But something you said to me that really stood out is the collaboration component, because I love the concept of collaboration versus competition, because I feel like it's just the way forward. Competition can be so negative, and it often is a lot of the times. And I would like
limiting, I think it can be limiting, right?
Yeah.
Because you really share. I like to think of it as co-opetition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Working together.
Yeah.
I mean, I chat to other beverage owners, and it also comes back to all tides lift all boats.
Yes.
So
something like that. Yeah.
I gotta get it straight. Every time I say it, I gotta go check that one and get it straight. But basically, tides lift all boats. So if I'm talking and collaborating or doing sharing space in an event with another beverage brand, as long as we're not positioned at the exact same target, it doesn't matter. I mean, humans, we drink on average 10 beverages a day. So
right.
I'm not expecting, and I'd be, I think, silly to think that, I'm going to dominate cannabis beverages and I want everybody to drink only Sense and Purpose. Like, that's never going to happen. And you don't want that to happen. Now,
the competition.
I do want them to drink 4 a day because I have recover, recharge, refocus, and relax. So I've made them all about the time of day so you can, one fits any occasion in the day. But I totally about the working together. I think, I kind of feel like that's more of a female thing too in our style of leadership. I
think so too. Yeah, because I've been I had 2024 as my year of community, and so I've been. A lot of the interviews I've been doing, this concept of collaboration, when I've been talking to guests on the show that were female or women, that seems to come up really naturally. It's not something I had to bring up myself. And I find that really interesting. And I love it because I really think, like I said, collaboration is the way forward. We've historically had a lot of competition, and I'm tired of it.
We got a huge world. There's room for everybody.
Yes, really exactly.
Is, right?
Yeah. So just to wrap up here before we go, what would surprise people about you?
Often my age does.
Right.
Right. Often they think I'm a lot younger than I am.
And I can see you. The people listening, you'll have to go perhaps to the show notes to check out the video, but you definitely do look younger than your age.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And I have white hair, so that's surprising, right?
It looks kind of blonde.
Platinum blonde.
Yeah.
It's all natural. This is COVID hair, by the way. I don't color it.
Yeah.
What would surprise people about me? I mean, I think probably people are most surprised when they learn that I've smoked cannabis all my life.
Right.
Especially since I was in the corporate world and I was pretty high up in the corporate world.
Right.
I think that's a little bit of a surprise. But
that would definitely be surprising.
Yeah.
That's a great way to wrap up, because a lot of the times I realize from doing this show and talking to so many people that people who use cannabis come from all walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
And period. That's it. So
that's it.
Yeah. So Karen, I just want to say thank you so much for talking with me today. This has been a really interesting conversation. And of course, I wish you all the best in the next year, the next few years, and I'll be watching what you're doing. And thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on. And I love what you're doing as well, Margaret, in terms of just helping break down that stigma, helping us understand different uses and different ways to enjoy it. And I think together we are making changes. So we're making a change. So I love it. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Karen as much as I did. I think she's fabulous. And I love to see strong, smart, capable women entrepreneurs shaking up their category space. And I have had the pleasure of interviewing many of them on this very show, which is one of the things that keeps me going, is just highlighting the stories and voices of people who are doing cool things in the cannabis space. And if you haven't had a chance to check it out already, do check out last week's episode on edibles trends. Karen has some thoughts that she shared about her predictions for 2025, as did a handful of other interesting people in the cannabis space. I think you would find that interesting if you haven't listened to that one yet. And of course, by all means, let me know about what you think about this episode, or maybe you have your own 2025 predictions that you would like to share. Don't forget that you can also get 45% off your Magic Mind bundle with my link, magicmind.com/bite-me-jam. And until next week, my friends, I'm your host, Margaret. Stay high. Enjoyed the episode? Why not share it with a friend? The more the merrier. Or you can leave a 5-star rating and review on your favorite listening platform. It all helps spread the word about Bite Me, the show about edibles, so that fellow edibles enthusiasts can make great edibles at home.